Good afternoon, everyone. Matthew Tim Hannock here, talking another edition of Live with Tim Hannock Law, special edition, usually at 5, but with picking up my daughter today at 5, we got to do it at 4. So let's talk about closing arguments in the Karen Reed case. Um, it is going to be, it's good. It's going to be about an hour and 15 minutes each side. Defense goes first, followed by the Commonwealth. What you're going to see is Alan Jackson needs to sum up um, 8 weeks of testimony. How is he going to do that? So, what is the theme of defense? We're going to do defense, and then we're going to discuss the Commonwealth. Um, the defense, like they said, it's going to be there was no collision, there was no collision, there was no collision. One of the things they abandoned, they are not going to try to dispute the 227 how long diamond clothing. That's now fact. They're not going. There's nobody who's going to say that it didn't actually happen at 6:30. So it didn't happen at 227. So Jennifer McCabe, with that, after several years, has been vindicated of that ridiculous claim. So you think about, all right, that's the first thing. Also, Alan Jackson during opening said you're gonna hear somebody say that John O'Keefe went in the residence. That also didn't happen. But remember, what the attorneys say is in evidence. But if the jury's paying attention and be like, your strategy changed, didn't it? Because you just promised two important things, both of which would help create your third party culprit, and you abandon it. So it may not be evidence, but the jury's wondering is going to be wondering, hmm, um, are you just making this up on the fly? So what you're going to hear is there was no collision. So Dr. Rensler was like, oh, they would have had this, they would have had broken bones. Um, but what he also says, and what Hank was able to get out of him, is no two pedestrian strikes are the same. So no matter what, there's going to be situations people aren't going to have lower extremity injuries. They're not going to have broken bones. And that's very important to get because they're like, just because this didn't happen doesn't mean what we're saying is wrong. And with Dr. Wolf, I don't know how much they're going to argue Dr. Wolf, just simply because watching the recreation, Hank Brennan is literally going, if he's diabolical, he'll play the defense's own accident reconstruction where at 18 miles an hour, the taillight shatters when it hits the arm. And what we know from evidence is that microscopic pieces of the taillight are embedded in that sleeve in the clothing. So Rensler's like, well, if there's no collision, nothing else matters. No, that's not how it works. You don't get to pick and choose which evidence you take into account when making your conclusion, which you don't. That's what Arca did in the first trial. They didn't know any of this stuff because the defense didn't tell them. And now that they know about it, now they had to basically change from here's our accident reconstruction, which shows you're wrong. It's just me telling you why you're wrong. I don't need to tell you anything. What's your prediction this time? Are you thinking hung jury? The only thing I think is going to hang is I think murder too. I think I just said it on live now from Fox. To be able to see murder too, there's enough evidence to sustain it that the juror is going to be like, all right, why did she call him 53 times? She knew she hit him. You would have to assume to get to murder too that she did it to try to cover her tracks, because how would you hit somebody and then be like, where are you? It's like, oh, I saw you in that snowbank. Are you still alive? So that's like the kind of like the primal fear aspect of it. That's why it was good she didn't take the stand, because they would have gotten it. But you're looking at it and the jury's like, I can see the vehicle backed up and that shows intent. But did she, like, where he's located? And I don't know. I don't think the jury hangs on. I think she gets convicted of the manslaughter, motor vehicle manslaughter, some kind of a variant. But I think they might hang on murder too. That's what my feeling is. I could be wrong. So I think the most likely situation is a conviction. Um, I thought did Hank. What are you saying? Hung or acquitted? Hank Brennan did an amazing job. I think, like I said, I don't think they're going to hang across the board. It would mean that yet again, the Commonwealth did not do a good job picking a jury and allowed a sleeper juror to get on there, because an independent person who doesn't wear pink and post on Facebook groups about their love of the defendant is going to look at this and be like, this is a pretty compelling evidence. Like, they have it almost down to the second when it happened. They have digital evidence, scientific, physical evidence. His hair is on the taillight. How do we say he wasn't struck by this vehicle? And there's no question that she was the driver of this vehicle. So I don't know how we get anywhere. So that's what they're, yes, of course, that's what they're going to argue, is the reverse is the intent to commit serious bodily injury. So the defense is going to continue to argue the no collision. They're going to talk about Officer Barrows saying that the taillight wasn't in the same condition. They're going to try to just throw it and see whatever sticks. Because the problem with arguing third-party culprits, so they can't argue that in closing. They're not going to, not getting the instruction. All they're going to argue is that the police should have looked at Brian Higgins. That's it. The hope is, instead of basically telling the jury this is a conspiracy, they lay it out in a way that the jury comes to that conclusion on their own. That's kind of what I think that's what they're doing on how Lapdog and Rancher. You think the jury saw they were very biased? Yeah. ARCA did themselves no favors whatsoever. No, like admitting under oath that they violated the sequestration order by giving each other testimony. The fact that they completely ignored the physical evidence, the digital evidence, the scientific evidence, even though the defendant herself states the data is the data. So ARCA just gave the opinion, like, I need you to say there was no collision. Perfect. I got an idea of what I'll do. Here's all the evidence they have. It's like, yeah, we don't need any of that because there was no collision. They didn't go out to didn't go to the crime scene and see the debris field. And it's like come on. How important are the clips, do you think? Oh, juries are always paying attention when the defendant speaks. The reason is they need to think, is this person capable of doing what they are alleged to be doing? Because anybody can say anything. My old saying, just because somebody says something doesn't make it true. So when you see the clips and she's talking to David Yannetti about whether or not if I hit him, like, do I have culpability? Yeah, you do. And it's like, that was a privileged conversation, and you just waived it by talking to this documentary crew. You changing, like saying it's like, oh, these were weak pores. The jury's not going to question. In the first case, they tried to argue, oh, she wasn't drunk. They didn't try to here. So I think the clips are an invaluable piece of evidence. Why do you think Hank chose not to do a rebuttal? Confidence case. So it is a little bit of confidence in the case, or worried the jury would annoy an already tired jury. It's a little bit of both. If you actually believe what ARC has to say, calling a bunch of witnesses to say they're wrong, it's not going to do anything. And you're looking at the jury. Part of being a great trial lawyer is reading the room. And if they're looking at Hank Brennan like, please, can you just stop this? Like, we know they're literally just telling us exactly what we want to hear, that they are hired guns, and that they're ignoring all the evidence. So I think it's a confidence in the case, and it's almost giving the jury fatigue. And then they're like, do you care anymore? No, that's what you want. I think AJ would try to sneak some blame. He can't argue third party culprit. He's just going to say they should have looked at Brian Higgins and everything and say this, that, and the other thing. Who is Higgins? Where did that dog come from? It's like, yeah. They go with the dog now. It's going to look like James Sultan in the Aaron Hernandez case, where he stated during closings that Aaron Hernandez had a gun, handed it off to whoever one of his friends were, and they shot Odin Lloyd. It just sounds ridiculous. Did I hear right? Did ARCA guy study? Yes. He was like, "Yeah, happy birthday to my kid," and everyone's like, This is a second-degree murder trial. This isn't a Wendy's, sir." So it was so strange, almost as strange as watching Dr. Wolf, make the Commonwealth's case for them for the accident reconstruction. Um, yes, he did. He was wondering. Yeah, he did actually wish his kid a happy birthday. It was strange. Um, A- AJ goes first, and Hank correct should adjust the closing accordingly. I think he knows what Jackson's going to argue. He said there is no collision, there is no collision, there is no collision. That's what they're going to try to do. They're going to talk about how Dr. Russell said this was an animal attack. Dr. whatever her name is, who was a sassy witness, say that it was an animal attack. And then it's like, no, it's literally it got struck by a vehicle, and those injuries are pretty consistent with that. And just having a bunch of people say whatever you want, and they're just he's gonna discredit. He's gonna start. Hank Brennan's close is gonna start by listing off the mountain of the evidence, and then discredit all of the witness. Dr. Russell was looking for 15 minutes of fame. Dr. whatever her name was the ME during the station nightclub fire, which was horrific. Um, I think the verdict will come fast. I don't think that's an interesting question. 8 weeks, the jury's not going to rush it. So, if the deliberations had started today, it's possible we could have had a verdict tomorrow. But I don't know if the jury's going to want to rush this. You never know what's going to happen with the jury. So you wonder, like, what else are they going to get into? Alan Jackson is very theatrical. He's gonna just try to argue, try to like point out the weird things. It's like, oh, look at him at the Canton PD. Look at him near the tail light, and try to confuse the jury, because confusing the jury has the ability to create reasonable doubt by them. Like, well, I don't know what happened. And they start to question themselves. Gaslighting has been a big thing in this case, going back almost a couple of years with this nonsense conspiracy that has been abandoned by the defense that created it. So it's going to be a situation. Jury, Hank Brennan's going to be saying a lot about common sense. Use your common sense. Here is the digital evidence of the phone in this precise location where John O'Keefe is found. Here's the scientific evidence that his DNA with his hair is on the taillight. His DNA is on the bumper. Microscopic pieces of the taillight are embedded in his clothing, the largest being a piece of rice, and most smaller. So if you can't pick them up, how can they be planted? And if they're not planted, how the hell did they get there? The simplest answer, he was struck by a vehicle. You put it all together. You add the 24 miles an hour backup. You add in the fact that all the taillight was found in 34 Fairview. You add in the fact that there was glass inside of his mouth that the defendant admitted to taking out. The fact that she admitted, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. You put all of that together in the defendant's own words. That's what it's going to be. The theme of his is going to be common sense. And that's going to be very powerful, because you're not asking the jury to believe some outlandish thing. You're just asking them to believe the most logical situation that all of the evidence corroborates. Hey, stay till 5 p.m. tomorrow. So the jury's, I think they'll do that, and you'll check. What do you think? Are you guys close? The answer is probably not. This was an 8-week trial. I don't know if we're going to get the same 18-hour deliberations, but I think tomorrow might be tough unless something crazy happens, because juries are undeniably unpredictable. But when you think of what Hank Brennan's, so we talked about what Alan Jackson's close is going to be. I was starting to discuss Hank Brennan's closing argument. And like I said, common sense, scientific evidence, physical evidence, digital evidence, and a bunch of witnesses who have no reason to lie, and the defendant's own words. So you have the accident reconstruction. You're like, this may seem a little all right with the blue paint and everything, but it seems to fit what was going on. It's like this is the black box data from her car. This you can't manipulate. Michael Proctor cannot change this. And one of the kind of a mistake was the defense not calling those witnesses, because what happened in the first trial is it made I don't know how much it actually mattered in hindsight. I don't know how much even no matter what anybody said in the first trial, they could have had the defendant on video confessing to the crime when the incident happened with 25 eyewitnesses. I still think those three jurors who held out would have been like, it's a deep fake. They're all part of this conspiracy, and it was a false confession. So that's going to be key, making sure that they don't have any of those sleeper jurors that is like, oh, I get to be on the Karen Read case, and I get to prevent her from going to prison. That is a worry. I think Hank Brennan has been along long enough to not allow those people on the jury and then be like, no, not this person. We don't want this F the police, or it's all a conspiracy, or I think Richard Delphi was framed nonsense got on the jury. I remember when I was in the Commonwealth last summer when the mistrial was declared. And I come out of the garage and these three young kids are screaming, "Free Karen Read." And it just goes to show you that it's kind of like, almost some people think it's like the cool thing to do. It's like, oh, and it's like, this lady's charged with murder. She's not a political martyr. The evidence all points in one direction, and that's directly at her. The first jury didn't acquit her. Why is this jury going to acquit her with a stronger case? I don't see it. I think the best what they can hope for is hung on the murder 2 count, and then a conviction for a lesser, and then the Commonwealth decides not to retry. Yeah, what do you think about the verdict form being confusing? All right, so I re-looked at the verdict form, and it's what I suspected. Judge Cannone used to be a defense lawyer. You don't do a verdict form with the not guilty up first. It throws everybody off because you're like, oh, okay, what? And you're trying to figure it out. It's like you do with the highest charge first. It should be inverted. And you're thinking, okay, murder 2. There's no real lesser included in a murder 2, like manslaughter, but they already have that. So you're at motor vehicle manslaughter. Then it's motor vehicle homicide is like a lesser included offense. Because remember, a motor vehicle manslaughter has a 5-year minimum mandatory on it, punishable by up to 20 years in prison. So it would definitely behoove the parties to make a more clear verdict form. So the jurors on be like, what did we actually convict? What did we agree on? That's what you don't want. There was too much information on the verdict form that the jury's like, I can't really understand. Yeah, they can stay longer if they wanted to, but I would be pretty shocked. Like I said, anything's possible, but I'd be pretty shocked if we had a verdict tomorrow. The defense didn't even try to disprove Repenter's third construction of the small collision that showed wouldn't damage. Yeah, they've kind of almost surrendered, if it were. Their only play, what they've realized, is that if the jury doesn't believe a collision. But it's really tough for me to be like, yeah, let's ignore all this evidence to that fact. And they didn't even call Trooper Proctor. They have his text message in there, but they didn't get to fillet him like this time. They didn't have destroy the accident reconstruction, I think like Trooper Paul or something from the first trial. So what was I going to say? Last year's verdict, it seemed pretty clear to me. There's too much information on there on when I looked at the verdict form, and a lot of stuff that it's like trying to figure out exactly what is actually being done. Matthew Timpanek, you are a breath of fresh air in the sea of YouTube lawyer grifters. Thank you. Well, thank you. I strive to just provide facts and evidence because it's unfortunately a lot of these individuals um, saw the writing on the wall that if you don't give in to their conspiracy, they're just going to go elsewhere. I was playing golf on Sunday, and the guy I was playing with he's a lawyer out of St. Petersburg, and his fiance has been obsessed with the case. And it's like, oh, what does she watch? She watches some stream with some older lady with glasses who sits there for 6 hours talking over all the witnesses. I just chuckled. I was like, well, seems right. I guess she hasn't changed in the last year, and I don't think she ever will. We don't do that because I have a real job and I can't spend 6 hours talking over witnesses. Kind of defeats the whole purpose of like allowing and actually hearing the evidence. Now the talking points are we're on the X-rays. It's like this is nonsense. Alan Jackson's going to likely argue this and try to be like, well, what about the? I'm like, God, stop! Like if that's what you got, that's what you got. But it is ridiculous. Hank should play Arca's videos with Karen's audio commentary. I think you're going to, during closing arguments, it's probably just going to be 20 minutes of the defendant making the Commonwealth's case for them, followed by showing the video from Arca, which basically confirmed how the taillight was destroyed. That would probably be one of the most diabolical closings ever. You just take the defense's whole case and be like, here you go. When in reality, there's just so much more to that. Which videos would you show in closing? Definitely the weak pores, because you want to first start off by you don't want to question about the DUI the motor vehicle manslaughter. The weak pores, how many drinks, the video is showing that. And Tara talking about, yeah, I did. I could have said I hit him. And it's like, okay, really? Definitely talk. And more importantly, the video is like, if I had hit him, ran over his knee, that's going to be just a nail in the coffin kind of a kind of moment, because it's like her own lawyer who's sitting over there told him, it's like, yeah, you have some criminal culpability. So the jury's like, okay, so which one do we choose of this motor vehicle homicide? Because that's going to be where they're like, can we all agree she hit him? Yep. All right. But is it murder? So it'll be interesting. Yeah, she doesn't listen, she's over the top. Yeah, I can't. It's a few of them, and it's just like, do you guys have jobs? Like, I have 125 clients. My phone rings off the hook, including I just got a crank phone call from some angry viewer from my Live Now from Fox appearance. So hilarious. I got to finish listening to it when we finish. Did you say how you voted on this case? What I said was, I think it's hung on murder 2 and convictions for the lessers. A conviction for motor vehicle manslaughter, and then leaving the scene of an accident. Leaving the scene of the accident is kind of interesting, because the jury has to find she knowingly knew that she hit him and then left the scene. So if they find it was a drunken accident, it could be the verdict could be similar to what the first jury said, acquitted on the murder 2, and then acquitted on count 3 because she hit him and she was too drunk to know. So I think it's conviction for 2 motor vehicle manslaughter and leaving the scene of an accident. And I just, if they get a conviction, they're not going to retry her for murder 2. There's no time. That'd be a waste. After she struck him in the car, which means he would have been in her headlights. She would have seen him. Taillights, not headlights. And so the way it was angled, she could have easily drilled him and then just drove off. So what else? Where I definitely play the one where she says she was expecting to find him outside. That's good, because it's like that confirms she never went in the house. Because she said, oh, I saw John go into the house. No, you didn't, because you also said you didn't in one of a prior interview. And when you said looking for outside. If you thought she went inside, you'd be looking inside first. Um, do you think other investigation repeatedly mentioned will have some sort of impact? Um, mm, Not that much. I heard that crank call, Matt. He sounded stoned. Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. I'm gonna delete it when I'm done with this because it was pretty actually whacked that actually happened. That individual when doing that, and it's just like ridiculous. What in some people will do, and it is what it is. After she struck, okay, she would have seen in the clip. She admits she shouldn't have been driving, but she wasn't that drunk. Yeah, you can't have it both ways. Like I shouldn't have been driving, but I wasn't drunk. What does the ad say? Buzz driving is drunk driving. Like it's a horrific defense. Um, will Hank be able to play any and all of the clips? He can play as many as he wants, but he's got an hour and 15 minutes, so he's got to choose. He's got to choose actually which one he wants to use, which one of the strongest, and what story they want to tell the jury, and like what they want to focus on. How long do you think they'll deliberate? 8 hours, 8 to 12 hours. That's my guess because there's a lot with it. People are going to have to be, going to have to be wrangled in. People are going to be upset. Like they're going to think, "Ooh, murder," and it's like, all right, no, let's do murder last, and let's do the other charges first, and see just be able to do that because that's where a vast majority of the conversation is going to take place in that murder manslaughter. Because if somehow they believe Dr. Rensler that it's like if there's no collision, then you don't consider anything else. If the jury believes that, if 12 people agree with it, then so be it. Then you can't do anything else. A decent time in PowerPoint. Yes, absolutely. I would have a PowerPoint presentation of kind of that timeline where it's like at this time connects to the Wi-Fi. This is when the phone is last used. It is. If we're getting another hung jury, I just it'd be if it's a hung jury, then it sends a message that if you have a lot of money to spend, use it poisoning the jury and just pushing this conspiracy, pushing people to think that this happened and all these people are responsible. But then when it actually comes to trial, you just abandon it. All while people have already made up their minds and believe it's like, oh well, they should have done this, they should have done that. It's like they had the person. They're not going to look at people where there's no evidence against. Like they're not going to be like a stealth juror if it's an acquittal. No, stealth juror would be for a hung jury because you only need one to hang for a hung jury. You need 12 people to agree. Yes, and I don't like the message it sends either that you can just gaslight everyone. You can throw money at idiots on Twitter who are mouthpieces for the defendant. I don't need to use their names, but I've had to block most of them because they're an absolute joke. So it is a situation where you're trying to figure out during closings, what is your strongest argument? What is the best 75 minutes that you got? And it's just the evidence, the defendant's own words. That's what you got to do. You put all of it together, all of the witnesses, there should be enough for motor vehicle manslaughter. There's enough to sustain murder too, but there's absolutely enough to sustain motor vehicle manslaughter. And all the grifters and the people who are like doing these absurd things, directed verdict, case dismissed. They just want the clicks in the cast. They don't know anything. They're too afraid that if they tell the truth, they're going to lose their audience. What do you think of the Bowden defense? It's what they should have been arguing the whole time. And on some level, on very slight level, it does worry me that if Hank Brennan did not pick a good jury and pick more of a jury he'd want as a defense lawyer, they might all read that instruction and be like, well, Why don't we just adopt this and then find her not guilty? We weren't given enough. It's not on us. Yeah. It's absolutely. So I think I'll end on this that it's like, yeah, with this PR campaign, it's a very, very slippery slope that anybody, especially if you just poison a jury and everybody's too afraid to actually like consider facts and evidence for being turtled or being attacked by people relentlessly and ending relationships. That's a really scary precedent. If the defendant was acquitted straight up without any of that stuff, so be it. But it's a real tough sell for me to try to convince all these people that 12 people are going to agree that, yeah, what they're saying based on absolutely nothing is true. It's like, yeah, there was no collision. I don't think that embedded piece of the taillight mean anything. I don't think the hair on the vehicle means anything. I don't know about the DNA. It could have got there. He could have ripped off his head. They could have planted off the sun. That's not the jury you want. And to be able to actually acquit, that's what you have to consider. This is what you have to believe. You don't have to be like, oh, well, I don't know about the collision. Stop. Ridiculous. Yeah, blaming a dog. But yeah, I think that's all that we have. I think I may do a something after lunch tomorrow. I haven't decided, but have a good for now. Thank you, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon.